Hello, and welcome to the walkthrough of the Funded Enrollment Calculator. This is being recorded on Wednesday, September 27th, 2023. In this recording, I will walk through the documentation you can use to complete the Funded Enrollment Calculator. The calculator is a tool that can be used to determine the total number of children funded to serve by service county within your entire contract's maximum reimbursable amount, and also the number of children required to meet the exceptional needs and severely disabled set-aside. The Funded Enrollment Calculator can be found on the California Department of Education's website at https://www.cde.ca.gov/fg/aa/cd. Before I begin, I want to note a couple of important items. First, the version of the Funded Enrollment Calculator I am using today is set up to calculate a 5% set-aside. The Funded Enrollment Calculator will be updated in future years as the set-aside percentage increases, so please be sure you are using the most recent version. And second, the CDE recognizes that enrollment at your agency may change over time and therefore encourage continuous use of the calculator. To complete the calculator today, I will be using examples of certified enrollment attendance and fiscal reports, which assumes that current enrollment is similar to prior reporting. Alternatively, if using prior reports is not reflective of current year enrollment, you can make your own assumptions as to what adjustment factors will be used at your agency. What that might look like for you would be perhaps creating an Excel spreadsheet with all of the time bases and categories displayed in CPARIS to arrive at an estimated child days of enrollment and adjusted child days of enrollment you can use to complete the calculator. In one of the examples I will review, I will demonstrate how to complete the calculator with enrollment information from 2 service counties. Currently, the calculator is set up to allow for 4 service counties. Should your agency serve in more than 4 service counties, please contact your fiscal analyst for assistance. First, let's discuss the structure of the calculator. You will find 6 tabs: the Info, Definitions, and Instructions tab, Service County 1, 2, 3, and 4, and finally, the Summary tab. The Info, Definitions, and Instructions tab contains general information and definitions, as well as instructions pertaining to completing the calculator. And moving to the Service County tabs, these are where funded enrollment will be calculated. All 4 service county tabs are identical and contain a mix of fields requiring data input, as well as locked fields with formulas that will auto-populate based upon data entered by the user. The Summary tab will automatically populate as the service county tabs are completed. Using the example of an agency with 2 service counties, they would complete the Service County 1 and Service County 2 tabs, which would calculate funded enrollment at the county level. The Summary tab would reflect the total of both service counties at the contract level. If you are an agency that serves in only 1 service county, you do not need to complete any tabs other than the Service County 1 tab. Let's get started with the first example, which is an agency serving in 1 county. So we are looking at the Service County 1 tab on the right. There are 3 columns in the calculator. A, which outlines the fields or the elements of the calculator. B, which contains instructions specific to those fields in column A. And C, which is the column where data is input by the user, as well as where the locked fields with formulas exist. The first 2 rows that require data entry are the maximum reimbursable amount, or MRA, and the minimum days of operation, or MDO. That information can be found either on the contract face sheet or on the most recent contract earnings calculation in CPARIS. In the example we are using today, I have taken that information from a contract earnings calculation. As you can see in this example on the left, this agency's MRA is $3 million and their MDO is $250. Entering the MRA will cause the set-aside to be calculated, which you will see in cell C14. Now we select the service county. In this example, let's use Fresno. As you can see, the selection of the service county automatically populates the service county rate in the first locked cell, C9. Next, enter the percent of services provided in this county. In this example, we are entering data for an agency that provides services in only one county, so we will enter 100%. Next, we must enter enrollment and adjusted enrollment. In our example, I'm using Certified Enrollment Attendance and Fiscal Report from CPARIS. First, you must enter the unadjusted days of enrollment. In the example I am using, there is no certified enrollment in mental health consultative services or MHCS categories. Please keep in mind if your agency reports in both certified MHCS and non-MHCS certified categories, you must add the totals of both sections together. You should never include non-certified enrollment. So first, let's enter the total days of enrollment. This number is the total of all days of enrollment across all categories from the enrollment attendance and fiscal report. Enter the cumulative fiscal year total. In our example, that is 28,806. Next, we will enter the total adjusted days of enrollment. This number is the total of all days of enrollment from each reporting category multiplied by the adjustment factors. In our example, that is 37,136.1592. Now you will see two fields below have populated based on the data just entered. First, the C12 field, which is using the information entered above, the child days of enrollment and adjusted child days of enrollment, to calculate a weighted average adjustment factor that will be used to determine funded enrollment. Next, in cell C13, you will see the calculation of the total number of children or funded enrollment in this service county. That is calculated based on the information you entered. The MRA, MDO, reimbursement rate, and percentage of services within the county. And in our example, that is 169 children. What we have completed up to this point has allowed us to determine the funded enrollment for this service county. Moving on to the next portion of the calculator, we will again need to use enrollment information to determine the funded enrollment associated with that set-aside amount that was calculated earlier. That is the $360,000. That is the portion of the MRA set aside to serve children with exceptional needs, including children with severe disabilities in our example. That set aside in this version of the calculator is determined by multiplying the MRA by 5% to represent 5% set aside, multiplied by 2.4, which is the full-time adjustment factor for exceptional needs and severely disabled categories. Beginning with cell C15, we will need to enter the unadjusted days of enrollment. Unlike what we entered earlier, this will only be the portion of enrollment being reported in the exceptional needs and severely disabled categories. Let's take a look again at the example report we used earlier. In the exceptional needs categories, this agency is reporting 1,100 full-time plus days of enrollment, 1,100 full-time, and 860 part-time to date, and that is the cumulative fiscal year. In these severely disabled categories, they're reporting 110 part-time days of enrollment. Adding those numbers together gets us a total of 3,170. That is the unadjusted days of enrollment associated only with the exceptional needs and severely disabled categories. Next, you will do the same thing with the adjusted days of enrollment, the days of enrollment multiplied by the adjustment factor categories. In our example, we will take 3,115.2, 2,640, 1,307.3720, and 167.2220 for a total of 7,229.794. Entering that last number will allow the weighted average adjustment factor to populate based upon the agency's enrollment in the exceptional needs and severely disabled categories. Using that weighted average adjustment factor, the calculator has determined 12 children is the funded enrollment required to meet the set aside. Here I want to pause to state that if an agency is not serving any children in the exceptional needs and severely disabled categories, the funded enrollment calculator can still be used. In that case, you should enter the number 1 in the total days of enrollment field, representing at least 1 day of enrollment, and 2.4 in the adjusted days of enrollment field. And this would be, yes, exactly there. And you will see doing so slightly changes the funded enrollment for the set aside, as the weighted average of what the agency is serving in our example is no longer being used. And now it's 11. Again, if you are an agency serving in only one service county, you can stop here. However, if you serve in more than one service county, you would need to continue on to the Service County 2 tab. So let's move through that example. First, let's update the percentage of services in the current tab we are in. Let's say the agency serves 70% of their contract in Fresno County and 30% in San Francisco. You can see how that change of percentage of services in this county also changed the funded enrollment. Moving to the Service County 2 tab, you will see the MRA and MDO have already populated from the first tab, so you do not need to enter those again. Enter the percentage of services in the second county, and that is 30% in our example for San Francisco. Now we'll use the reported data for this county. Again, using the enrollment, attendance, and fiscal report and looking at this county's tab, we have 2,385 unadjusted days of enrollment and 2,528.5505 adjusted days of enrollment. And in this county, the agency's funded enrollment is 39. Moving through the same steps as before to determine the funded enrollment associated with the set-aside specific to this county. In this county, our example has the agency reporting in only one exceptional needs and severely disabled category, the exceptional needs part-time. So we can take the numbers from there, 670 cumulative total days of enrollment and 995.821 adjusted days of enrollment. The calculator has determined 4 children are required to serve the set-aside associated with this county. Now we can take a look at the Summary tab, which will display the information for both service counties. First, you can see the service county check, which may display a value, which is fine if you can look at the other 2 tabs and see that it is 100%. If you do see value, you can actually enter 0 in service county 3 for the percent. And you can enter 0 in service county 4 for the percent, and that will actually populate correctly for you. There. And now we see OK, which tells us that the tabs that were used to populate service county information equal in 100%. If they do not, you will see an error displayed there. We can again see the MRA and then the total funded enrollment from all service counties, which is 157 in our example. And of that number, the funded enrollment required to meet the set aside, which is 12. That brings me to the end of this reporting. If you have questions about the funded enrollment calculator, please reach out to your fiscal analyst. The assigned fiscal analyst for your agency can be found in the analyst directory, which is on the Early Education and Nutrition Fiscal Services webpage at https://www.cde.ca.gov/FG/AA/CD. Thank you.